Greetings friends, it's me, Wayman29. Welcome once again to another video on the Apostle Paul. In this video we're going to be going through an outline on his life, and we're going to be using the writings of St. Paul, a Norton Critical Edition, to get some kind of grip on who Paul was, where did he come from, and kind of some background so we know why things happen the way they do later, so to speak. So it's very important to understand the dating of these texts, because the timeline puts a kind of clearer picture on the transition of the thought process in the theology. In our minds, as we read the biblical literature, we subconsciously think at times that the texts are written in historical order. That is not the truth. And especially with the life of Paul, we see stark differences between the book of Acts and Paul's writings himself. So why is that? Acts was written much later. I'll be posting a time chart in the details section over there, so be sure to look at that because it will be very helpful. I think First Thessalonians is actually the earliest text in the New Testament writings. Acts is much later. So, what would be more accurate? Paul's writings himself and what he said he did, rather than the sometimes thought to be romanticized view of the early church history accounted for in Acts. You can use that intermixed, however you have to view that with a grain of salt, because Paul's writings are Paul's views, and the writings in Acts are the views of Luke, or the writings or the views attributed to Luke. So there's going to be some differences. Luke tries to associate Paul as much as possible with the Church of Jerusalem. However, in the writings of Paul, we find out there are some differences, and it may not have been exactly that way. So, what do we know about Paul? He's said to have a Jewish father. He's from the tribe of Benjamin, and he brags about that. Brags about being more learned than most people of this day in Jewish law, and he claims to be a Pharisee. However, when we think about this, anytime he quotes the biblical literature, it's always from the Greek Septuagint. So he's mainly grown up in the diaspora and came back and ended up being a persecutor of the early Christians, or the early Jesus communities. And he has the vision. He ends up transforming, and also his theology ends up transforming, which is pretty amazing, and which we'll probably get into much more later. Apparently he had some relatives when he visits Jerusalem. The son of his sister was there, and it's very unlikely that at the time of his ministry he was probably in his midlife, which accounts for a lot of the activities, but nobody knows exactly if he was married or not, and in his writings we kind of get the hint that Christians are supposed to be single, like he preaches that. Now there are some texts, as any heroes, there are extra texts written about Paul and stories attributed to him, and also they get into there's one kind of silly story, which is kind of funny, about Peter and Simeon Magus having a duel, which some think that it was actually meant to be the Apostle Paul under the code name. And I'll try to find some of these texts and post them, because these pseudepigraphal texts about these end up telling us how they were viewed, even though they can't be taken as being more reliable or anything like that. They give us a view on how the public later viewed him in legends and things like that. So that's a little bit of the background, and next video we're going to get into a little bit on what Paul thought. We're going to be using the New Jerome commentary and a little bit more of Bar Ehrman's book and kind of see where he's going. Then we're going to get into the text of 1 Thessalonians and see what that writing was all about and what Paul was trying to get across to the church at Thessalonica. So take care, friends, and remember, if everyone's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.